Hello, VC. It's a Prince Buster affair. Coming at you with a special Reggae Spotlight Tribute Edition. I actually had another one ready to go, but news came recently of the passing of Prince Buster on September 8th of this year, so I thought I'd better do a special tribute edition. This is from the Message Dubwise. I don't have this on vinyl, only on CD, and that is the voice of the DJ Big Youth introducing the first track, produced by Prince Buster. This was one of the very first dub albums that ever came out as an LP. Previously, dub had been issued as the B-side of singles, kind of as a space filler, cost-cutting measure. And as the possibilities of mixing the tracks began to be explored more fully, they started to issue LPs. And the various producers put these out kind of around the same time frame. Nobody's quite sure exactly which was the first one that was put out, but Prince Buster's has a claim to it. Originally issued in Jamaica around 1972 and a little bit later in the UK. Prince Buster was born Cecil Bustamante Campbell in 1938. He was named after Alexander Bustamante, a politician who later became the first Prime Minister of Jamaica after independence in 1962. Prince Buster, the Prince part of his name came from his boxing. He was an amateur boxer. His idol was Muhammad Ali, whom he later got to meet and who he emulated to a certain extent. He converted to Islam also. He had that same kind of braggadocio attitude, taking on rivals, taking shots at people. He had a pugnacious attitude. He was one of the prime innovators of ska music. But before all that, he started as I said, as an amateur boxer. He was the leader of a street gang. He would follow a sound system called Tom the Great Sebastian, which would hold dances periodically around Kingston. Now, the Jamaican recording industry at this time in the 1950s was kind of just getting started. It hadn't really taken off yet, but the big deal was sound systems. And all these sound system operators, which was basically a big mobile disco that would hold, or stereo that would hold dances, and people would come and pay money to get into these dances and buy drinks and listen to tunes that they couldn't hear anywhere else. So the various sound system operators would be very competitive with each other to see who could get the most exclusive tunes that would make people want to come to their dances. It was highly, highly competitive. The top three in the 1950s were Duke Reid, later of the Treasure Isle label, C.S. Clement Seymour Cox and Dodd, they call him, later of Studio One, and another sound system operator called King Edwards. Prince Buster came up following Tom the Great Sebastian. Such was his reputation as a street gang leader on the streets that Clement Seymour Dodd was impressed with his tough physical toughness, his reputation, and hired him as security for his dances, for his sound system. So Prince Buster's first job was collecting money from people entering the gates, providing security inside the dance. This was the time of the Rude Boys, so occasionally there would be outbreaks of violence. As a bodyguard for Mr. Dodd himself, and also to go around to the other guys' dances and spy on what records they were playing and try to get those records into their own dances. This was a thing. These guys would travel to America and search out rare records of jazz, R&B, blues, that kind of boogie-woogie thing, and bring them back to Jamaica and hopefully get tunes that the people wanted to hear that nobody else had. Now, as as American music began to change to rock and roll, the supply of records that they wanted began to dry up, so they began recording their own music in kind of a similar R&B kind of style. Prince Buster was one of the prime innovators of ska music. He put out a song called "Oh Carolina," which was by a duo called the Folks Brothers. The Folks Brothers were kind of a singing duo, kind of like, I guess, like the Everly Brothers, but in a more folky Caribbean style. They had a song called "Oh Carolina" that they wanted to record. Prince Buster was interested, but he thought it needed something a little extra. There was a Rastafarian drumming troupe playing around town that he'd heard of, led by a man called Count Ossie. Now the Rastafarians at this time were very much a fringe element, very radical, very revolutionary. The Jamaican establishment looked on them with absolute disdain, with their dreadlocks, their use of ganja. They were invariably from the poorest shanty parts of town or up in the hills playing their drums. But they had preserved these African drumming traditions from the days of slavery, from centuries before. Prince Buster was the very first one to bring these guys into a recording studio, and they added their drumming percussion to "O Carolina," which was otherwise a fairly innocuous love song. And that revolutionary spark of bringing that drums with its tradition of resistance against the imperial colonizers and its connection to African history was, if anything could be said to be the flashpoint or the spark of the Jamaican recording industry, that song was it, and Prince Buster was the man who recorded it. He would, as I said, he would be one of the prime originators of developing ska music, working with the musicians who would become the Scotalites, particularly the guitarist Jah Jerry, who he got to put a little extra emphasis on his afterbeat in his playing, and that helped create the choppy ska rhythm. Prince Buster by this point had moved on from his job working for Coxsone Dodd. He set up his own sound system, Voice of the People. See him like Muhammad Ali, setting himself up in this kind of popularist role, and challenging the establishment, the established producers, or producers they would become, sound system operators. So the big three at this time in the 1950s was King Edwards, as I said, Sir Coxsone, and Duke Reid, and he had kind of immortalized them on a song called The King, the Duke, and the Sir. But one of his biggest songs was called Shaking Up Orange Street. This is a recent pressing. Prince Buster, Shaking Up Orange Street. Orange Street was a street in Kingston, which was kind of a hub of the nascent music industry. A lot of record shops were there, and he set up his shop, Prince Buster's Record Shack, at 127 Orange Street, one of those very iconic addresses in Jamaican music that people still remember today, and soon began kicking his productions into high gear. He was particularly working with a singer called Derek Morgan in his early days. He had poached him from Duke Reid. Together they began issuing a series of singles. Derek Morgan would become one of the most popular Jamaican singers of the 60s, but eventually he defected from Prince Buster to another up-and-coming music producer called Leslie Kong, who was actually the first man to record Bob Marley. So feeling somewhat affronted by this, Prince Buster issued a song called Blackhead Chinaman, taking a shot at Derek Morgan as a black man going to work for a Chinese Jamaican, Leslie Kong. Derek Morgan responded with a song called Blazing Fire, and the musical feud was on, with them issuing diss records back and forth. And Prince Buster was the first to introduce this in Jamaican music, these kind of musical feuds. It's continued ever since. And apparently there was no real bad feelings away from the studio. They were all friends, but it was a way to drum up interest in the music, get people buying records, and just great publicity. So Prince Buster began issuing LPs under his own name. I don't have a huge amount of his music under his own name myself. The Folks Brothers tune, by the way, is included on many compilations, but I have it on The Story of Jamaican Music, a 4-CD set on Island Records. This originally came out in 1993. I've probably had this close to 20 years, I would think. One of the absolute greatest overviews of Jamaican music ever put together. There have been others since, but to my mind, unsurpassed. And Prince Buster, O Carolina by the Folks Brothers, the very first song on here, leading off the track. Also his other hits, Hard Man, Fi Dead, and Al Capone are on here. Some Derek Morgan, all on the first disc. Another LP that came out very early, 1963, was I Feel the Spirit. It's Prince Buster in Pocomania gear here. Pocomania was kind of a rural gospel revival religious tradition in Jamaica, with kind of a lineage descended from the African religions. And this is a recent reissue on Dynamite out of the UK. This came out 2014, I think. But you've got some of his big early hits here: Wash All Your Troubles Away, Hold Them, Shaking Up Orange Street Again, cover of We Shall Overcome, the title track, Madness, later probably, I would think, inspired the two-tone group's name, and Closer Together, I believe Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions tune, if I'm not mistaken. Throughout the ska era, his recordings were issued in the UK on an imprint called Blue Beat Records, which eventually released over 600 singles attributed to Prince Buster just between the early 1960s up to about 1967 or so. Around that time, the beat had kind of slowed down and changed to rock steady. Prince Buster kept up with the times. He recorded a series of tunes adopting the persona of Judge Dredd, which he would hand down sentences to the Rude Boys. The Rude Boys were kind of, I guess, gangsters, you would call them. They would go around dances and cause trouble, pulling out their knives and stuff like that. It was a huge thing in the 1960s where they would cause riots and various troubles. The music industry at the time was kind of split on the Rude Boys. Some kind of sympathized with them on record. Prince Buster came out harshly handing down 100-year sentences for various infractions on his records, which is in his own records he would vary between singing and kind of spoken word performances, almost kind of a gospel sermon-y kind of vocal delivery. So, continuing to release various productions. This is a later one he came out with. This is a release on Sunspot label out of the UK from a couple of years ago. Sister Big Stuff. Quite a few covers on here. We're getting into the 1972, this one, the early reggae era. It's got covers of Bridge Over Troubled Water on here. Stick By Me, which was well done, or a famous song by John Holt. Nina Simone's Young, Gifted and Black. Cool Operator, which was a famous song by Delroy Wilson. And also a cover of Sata Masagana, kind of the reggae national anthem. Originally composed by the Abyssinians. Around the same time, he issued the first LP by Big Youth, Chi Chi Run. Credited Big Youth, but there's also tunes on here by Dennis Brown, Alton Ellis, a DJ called Little Youth, who was a kid kind of emulating Big Youth. That's probably them together on the motorcycle on the back, I would assume. As well as instrumentals by the Prince Buster All-Stars. And what have we got on here? Yeah, great Alton Ellis song on here. Kind of a dubby take of Since I Fell For You. So that was the debut album by Big Youth. He would become a superstar in the 1970s as time went on, eventually recording for Virgin Records. And as I said, Prince Buster around the same time released The Message Dubwise, one of the very first dub albums. That was kind of, these couple of albums here were kind of the last gasp of his recording career. He was losing interest. His recordings had been popular in the UK, where he had switched to kind of a sexually explicit slack style, they call it, issuing songs like Rekka Pum Pum and Big Five, and these were big in the UK market among the skinhead crowd, who were working class youths who gravitated toward this kind of Jamaican music. But at home, he had kind of drifted away from the center of the music industry, and his output tailed off progressively until by the early 70s his productions pretty well stopped. In 1979, the Specials put out a song called Gangsters, which reworked Prince Buster's Al Capone. The Specials, Madness, and all the two-tone groups were hugely inspired by Prince Buster's records, and it was on the second wave of ska, two-tone, and everything that came after. All the different waves of ska were ultimately, to a large degree, inspired by Prince Buster. So Prince Buster, 1938 to September 8th, 2016, one of the towering giants of Jamaican music, and we will not see his like again. So that's my special tribute for you guys. And I want to give a couple of shout-outs to some recent channels. I always forget to do this. Rigo Hernandez. Check this guy's channel out. He is a funky guy, just starting out in the VC. Got some killer selections for you guys. Bobby BTO, another relatively new guy. Check out his channel. Another fat bearded man talking about records. One of the funniest guys in the VC. Great intro to his channel. He's mainly focused on country music, but he knows a lot of different genres as well. Jacqueline Rose, check her out. So that is my special reggae tribute for you guys. Hope you enjoyed, and peace.